Hello, how's it going? Today I will be doing the Booktube About Me tag, and I was tagged to do this by Izzy from Izzy Reads, so thank you very much Izzy for tagging me. First question is, what do you study or what is your job? I graduated from university in 2015 with a Bachelor of Journalism, and pretty much 1 week later I was really lucky to get a job at the local free newspaper that comes through everybody's letterboxes, and I have been in that job ever since. Looking back at university, I realised I was really not very good at journalism, and I probably would have much more enjoyed doing something like English literature. Unfortunately, at my university there wasn't really an English lit course that I could even do some electives from, so my favourite classes ended up being the film studies units that I took as electives. It all worked out for the best in the end, because without my degree I wouldn't have got the job that I currently have, and currently I am not a proper journalist, and I definitely won't ever be a proper journalist because I'm just not very good at talking to people, and that's kind of a key part of being a journalist. What I actually do is commercial features, so I write paid for editorials, and I also write some real estate property reviews, and then last year I got the opportunity to start doing film reviews and film interviews for the paper, which is definitely my favourite part of the job, and so it turned out those film studies units actually have come in handy. Second question is, what is your favourite social media channel? If we're not counting YouTube, then I think this would probably be Instagram. I feel like Instagram is the social media that is purely for me. I kind of use it as a photo album and just post things that I think are pretty or food that I really enjoy to sort of share the places in Perth where you can get really good vegan food. Probably this time last year I would have said Tumblr, and it's funny, I remember when I was still going on Tumblr regularly, I would sort of think, I wonder when I'll stop doing this. I wonder when there will be a moment where suddenly this doesn't become fun anymore, and that kind of happened towards the end of last year. I just don't have the urge to go on that social media site anymore. It used to be my very favourite place where I felt like I could be myself more than any other social media platform, and maybe YouTube's just replaced that now. Question 3, if you had another channel, what would it be about? Well, I actually created this channel years and years ago to be a channel about veganism, so I probably would make a second channel about veganism if I had the time to. The reason I didn't give myself a bookish name and just use my name for my channel name is because I didn't want to limit myself to just Booktube, and I wanted to be able to talk about other topics without feeling worried that I was breaking out of the mold of my channel or something like that. As it turns out, 99% of the videos I make are about books, just because they're the easiest ones to make and also the ones I find really enjoyable. My idea of what veganism is so personal to me just because it's something I've lived with throughout my whole life. To me, it's an ethical idea of doing as little harm to the world around you as you possibly can, and that kind of underpins everything that I do, not just in regards to what I eat and whether I don't buy leather or whether I don't buy products that have been tested on animals, but that includes how I treat other people as well. For me, it's such an all-encompassing way that I try to live my life by, and I feel like in the media it kind of gets taken over with certain ideas of what it is, and I totally understand why people view veganism in a certain way, because if the only time you've ever heard the word is associated with those news articles about parents who've starved their children or people who've tried to feed their cat only carrots, then that's the only idea you're going to have of vegans. I feel like a channel would be really useful to sort of dispel some of the myths and ideas around the word vegan, and also just to show people what I eat, because the biggest question I get asked is, so what do you actually eat? And I find that really hard to explain because I just eat what I've always eaten. Question 4, do you play any instruments? Yes, I play the piano. I took piano lessons from about the age of 7 or 8, I think, and I continued with lessons up until year 12, and I still enjoy playing the pieces that I already know and learning new pieces. Specifically, I tend to stick to classical music. I actually find it easier to play, weirdly, than modern music. I love playing piano. I feel like that's the one thing that I do purely for the fun of it, for no particular reason apart from that I enjoy doing it. I find sometimes, not all the time, but I find it really relaxing and a good way to clear my head, because when I'm playing a piece that I know really well, I don't have to concentrate on it too hard, and so my mind can kind of wander, and sometimes I solve problems that way by keeping my hands busy but allowing my mind to think freely. Question 5 is, what hobbies do you have other than reading? I definitely say piano is my main hobby that I have. That is something that I do regularly that is purely for me. I guess I could say watching films is kind of a hobby, though I do get paid for it now, so I kind of consider the films that I watch outside of that to be kind of research in a way, because I feel like it's important to have as wide a perspective on film history as possible to ensure I have a proper background to the reviews I'm writing and the films that I'm watching now. Obviously there are still so many famous films that I'm yet to see, so it's a very long and ongoing process. I definitely say op shopping is kind of a hobby. It's something I really enjoy doing, and I will go specifically to a suburb because I know there's a good op shop there, so I guess I kind of go out of my way to look at secondhand clothing and secondhand books. I also really enjoy cooking and baking, though again that has a purpose in that I need to do that to feed me, in terms of cooking dinner and lunch at least. I guess baking is more of a fun hobby, but I'm not very adventurous. I usually stick to the things that I know, whereas my sister will try new things all the time. So really cooking is more of her hobby. I mainly just do it when I want something particular to eat. Number 6 is favorite TV shows. Definitely my number one favorite TV show that I've watched more than any other is Horrible Histories. With its original cast, it's currently running with a new cast and it's definitely not as good, sadly, but the original 5 seasons are amazing. I'm not normally a fan of sketch comedy, but somehow it works in this format because you are just learning historical things. You're not getting invested in characters necessarily, but the actors are so great at creating these comedic characters out of historical people. I would say the comedic performances are sometimes the most subtle I've ever seen. Like, they can just move an eyebrow and I will be rolling around in fits of laughter. It's one of those shows that was just always repeated on ABC Kids, and so I've watched episodes over and over again and I never get bored of it. There's also a comedic song every episode and I know all the words because I found a way to download them off the internet and put them on my phone. Part of the reason why I love Tumblr was because I found on there other people who also love Horrible Histories, and so there was a genuine Horrible Histories fandom, people talking about which person was their favourite, which one they were most attracted to, and that core group of actors and writers continue to make other shows and a film as well. They made a film called Bill about William Shakespeare, and they have a new more adult show apparently coming out later this year, which is so exciting. My other favourite shows I've kind of put into favourite categories. So a genre that I always go back to is British comedies like The IT Crowd and Black Books and Spaced. They're shows that I can watch over and over again forever. The second genre adaptation of Pride and Prejudice with Colin Firth, shows like North and South with Richard Armitage, even more recent adaptations like Little Dorrit. I just love all those classical literature adaptations, and I always find them immensely comforting, but also I find something new in them every time because the stories have so much depth to them. One particular show I want to mention that is a period show, but it's not based on any book, is a show called The Hour. This stars Ben Whishaw and Romola Garai, back in the day before Ben Whishaw was a huge star, and they play journalists working on this news program for the BBC in the sort of, I think it's the late 50s, and it talks about real historical events like the Suez Canal crisis. This was probably the show that made me pick journalism as my degree, which is not a good reason to pick a degree, but everyone in it is so attractive and they wear such amazing clothes, and the story is so in depth. There's lots of stuff about spies and you're never quite sure who's saying the truth and who's lying, and it's one of those shows I can watch over and over again because I don't think I understood everything that was going on the first time I watched it. The most tragic thing is that series 3 ends on a cliffhanger, and the writers had intended on making a third series and that was going to be the last series, but because it wasn't rating that well, the BBC cancelled it, and I don't think I'll ever forgive them for that. Like, surely it wouldn't have been that expensive to have just made a third series. I'm still hoping that someone like Netflix will pick it up and make it before Ben Whishaw and Romola Garai get too old to reprise the roles. Question 7 is, what got you into reading? Reading is just such an enormous part of my family that there was no question that I would read books. Turns out I have become the biggest reader in my family in terms of the amount of books that I read, but it's just something I've always loved. Perhaps because I am quite a fast reader and it was something I would consider myself good at as a child. I very quickly devoured books, so of course I'm going to keep doing that. It might be partly because I never had a PlayStation as a kid, so I didn't have any other distractions. We had a PC computer in the living room and my sister and I were allowed to be on it and play, well, we had educational games at first, then we sort of advanced to games like Age of Mythology and Lego Harry Potter, but we were only allowed an hour each on the computer, so I had to fill the rest of my time with something, and reading was the accepted thing that I was always praised for doing, so it seemed like an obvious choice to me. I think I've always used reading as a way to experience experience the world and understand the world. People tend to make a lot more sense in a book where their actions and their feelings are explained, at least in kids' books they usually are, and everything has a nice resolution, and I think I found that immensely comforting. Question 8 is, what is your favourite and least favourite genres? So I'm not sure how broad or specific this is meant to be. I would say that I don't tend to read genre fiction. Everything I read could kind of be categorised as either literary fiction or contemporary fiction or classics, basically. But obviously within those broad categories, books can be more specifically categorised, and I would say my least favourite would be like a straight romance. I guess my favourite genre would be, and I was talking about this with someone at work, but my favourite kind of stories are the ones that are the most realistic, that they could almost be considered boring because they're literally just real life on the page. But the most mundane the details are, the more interested I am in it. And I was sort of wondering whether this goes back to when I homeschooled. I was always fascinated by stories about schools and just fascinated by schools in general because it was something that everyone took for granted, that was an experience that you would have. But at that time I had not experienced it. So my fascination with normal life was in a way the same way you might be fascinated by fantasy, because I think certain normal things to me, like how going to school was for me as a child, those things may as well be fantasy because they were so beyond my reality, if that makes sense. But I can never tell what stories I'm going to like from the blurb. It really usually just depends on the way the author's written it. Question 9 is, what books define your childhood? Now this might take a while because I have written down so many. Books I remember reading over and over again were definitely books like Enid Blyton, very specifically her boarding school books, and also the adventure series. So they were called like the Island of Adventure or the Sea of Adventure, and they featured I think it was 2 pairs of brother and sister called Philip, Jack, Dinah and Lucianne, and I think they're intended to be targeted at slightly older audiences than like the famous 5 and the Secret 7, and also they involved much more extravagant adventures where they'd like go to different countries, so it wasn't just in England. I have such strong memories of reading the Asterix comics and Tintin comics while I ate my breakfast every morning. Me and my friends were especially obsessed with Asterix and Obelix. We always used to pretend that we were Gauls fighting against Romans whenever we got together in the park. Edwardian children's literature was a big part of my childhood, so like the Nesbit books like The 5 Children and It, Francis Hodgson Burnett books like The Secret Garden and Little Princess, and then also things like Anne of Green Gables. There seems to be something about the early 1900s that generated a lot of amazing children's literature. Obviously Robin Klein books were a huge influence on me. Laura Ingalls Wilder Little House on the Prairie books I absolutely adored. Swallows and Amazons, I love all those books. And lastly, the Royal Diaries was something that I was obsessively collecting as a child. They were a series of books written by different people, and the conceit was that they were diaries from famous queens and princesses from around the world from when they were young. So there was one about Queen Victoria, Elizabeth I, Mary Queen of Scots, and then ones I don't remember the names, which is really bad, but ones from Japan and Africa, and I think there was a Pocahontas one and one from Hawaii. So they were an amazing way to learn about different cultures and different histories around the world. And also they had the most stunning illustrations and were gold and had the like sprayed gold on the edges of the pages, and like what child can resist a gold book? And they're all in hardback as well. Last question is, tell us an interesting fact about yourself. Usually my one interesting fact is that I've been vegan since I was born, which I've already talked about. So I guess another interesting fact is that I'm the only redhead in my family that I am aware of. My parents were incredibly shocked when I came out with little patches of red hair, but that recessive redheaded gene is insidious and will pop out without warning. Weirdly, there's an abnormal amount of redheads at my work, so for once I actually feel like I belong, which is nice. So that is the end of the tag. I am going to tag Alex from What Page Are You On, Vix from 1 Minute Reads, Tash from Tash Talks Tons, and Natalie from Curious Reader. I forgot to check whether you've already done this tag, so just ignore this if so. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye!